you want.
Hi, this is Ken from Let's Rock.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
All right, all things considered. I think we're actually doing okay.
It's a pretty crazy world right now.
Yeah, I don't know when this thing that I do will ever be a thing again. So yeah, I assume we'll get together and hear music again in the future. We just don't know what form or when.
Yeah, and I was checking out your website, and it says you're playing in Ottawa on October 2nd. Is that realistic or not realistic?
I don't have a clue. I know there are shows lined up, for other bands around then. Like I just checked who was at of Montreal yesterday, and they've got some shows in Ohio. So, people are lining things up, and then we'll see if they get canceled or postponed or whatever. When this whole started, I remember talking to our agent, and he was just like, "Yeah, they might have to shut down for like 4 weeks. Hopefully they'll be, and it's like, it's just getting longer and longer."
Yeah, what do? You writing?
Yeah, I've been doing some writing. I'm doing some editing right now. Just trying to catch up on some stuff musically. So yeah, pushing forward.
This is so bizarre. This whole pandemic thing.
Yeah,
it's driving me crazy because I need my live music.
Oh, I know. I stumbled upon Daniel Romano's latest album. It's a live album, and it's I've been listening to it constantly because it kind of captures all the things I miss about live shows. So
it's driving me crazy. I usually go to 2 or 3 shows a month, and this is freaking me out.
God, when I was a youngster, I'd go to 3 or 4 shows a week. When I first moved to Vancouver, I was just out every night.
Yeah, it's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
So let me tell you a bit what I'm doing here. I'm ever since Neil Peart passed away, I've kind of been on a Canadian music binge, and started remembering how incredible the music was and is in this country. And I started thinking I should probably do something about this because I don't think enough people know about Canadian music.
Right.
So what I'm trying to do is just do a little bit of talking about what the scene is like and what the scene was like when you guys started, and just talking Canadian music.
Sure.
What was the scene like when you guys came out? I mean, there was some incredible music going on then. 5440, Northern Pikes, Bryan Adams, Rush, Triumph, Kim Mitchell. My God, the list goes on and on and on. What was it like when you started?
Well, for us, we were all born in the mid-'60s, and so growing up in Kelowna, it was a small town, and bands like Max Webster and Triumph and those kinds of bands would tour through town, and those are the popular bands. But we were looking toward Vancouver's punk scene for inspiration more than anything else. We were never really that into a lot of the mainstream bands in Canada. We were into DOA and Pointed Sticks and Modernettes and Subhumans and that whole scene. And that's where we got our main inspiration. And I guess 5440 were sort of part of that scene. And the band I had before Grapes was called Empty Set. And I remember we played one show in Vancouver. I think it was like 16 or 17. We went down and played this show, opening for 5440. And then a few months later, they asked our drummer to join the band.
Oh.
So that was the end of us, and he carried on with them for a couple albums.
What was it like, though? I mean, there must have been music everywhere.
It seemed like there was music everywhere in Vancouver, and that's why we were dying to move to Vancouver from Kelowna. Kelowna didn't have music really, except for the things that we would create. Like Tom, I remember he got a permit to have a punk rock concert at the City Park in Kelowna. He was 14 years old, and he went down to City Hall and got a permit, and our bands all played, and a bunch of hooligans came, and they were whipping bottles at us, and the police were called, and the police had to give us an escort out and stuff like that. Seriously, it was just kids playing music, but as far as anybody was concerned there, we were public enemy number one. You didn't want to walk down the street carrying a record bag if there was a Ramones record in it or something like that, because somebody would, no joke, beat the shit out of you.
Really?
For carrying. Yes. It sounds completely ridiculous as I tell this story, but it is the truth. Tom got beaten up a couple of times.
Wow.
It was that scary to males to see guys cut their hair short. They were so terrified of it that they had to beat them up.
Holy.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, it was insane. So, growing up in Kelowna, our only exposure to music was, a few concerts would come through in the summertime. A big one for me was, in my grade 12 year, Split Ends came with the Paolas opening, and Nick Ronson was playing keyboards for the Paolas, and I was front row center for that. So that was a really big deal for me. But yeah, most of the shows I wouldn't have gone to.
That's another band that I forgot about, the Paolas.
Yeah.
Which turned into Rock and Hide.
Yeah. I saw them a few times as Paolas. And in fact, the first time I saw them, I was with Chris and Tom in Vancouver, and Paolas were opening for the Subhumans.
Wow.
Yeah, they were, at the time, Paolas hadn't been signed to A&M. They were just another band with a 7-inch, and they were so good. Paolas were an excellent band.
They sure were. Yeah, they totally skipped my mind. You mentioned a few of the bands. I'm just trying to get kind of a background on what inspired you to be a musician. Was it Canadian music, or was it something else?
No, for us, or for me, and I know for Chris and Tom, the big inspiration was the Beatles, and then for me, the British Invasion kind of grew out of that, like the Who and the Stones and the Kinks. Then it just sort of expanded from there. I liked music, so we'd learn about more and more music. But I guess around the time I was in grade 7, going into grade 8, we started reading about punk rock. Like, our local newspaper used to carry excerpts from Rolling Stones about this scary music going on in England where people spit on each other. Like, they really did make it sound like they're insane. You wouldn't believe what's going on over there. And I found this incredibly exciting. So that's what inspired me to try and write songs. I didn't, I never thought I could write songs as good as the Beatles, but hearing the Clash and whatever, all that
Sex
stuff.
Pistols.
I still remember the first time I heard the Sex Pistols was on my brother's clock radio, and we were just flabbergasted. We thought, how can people be saying these guys can't play? They're so crappy. It's like it is perfect. Anybody who says they can't play is deaf. They don't understand anything about music. The Sex Pistol album is perfection. So yeah, when I realized that everybody was lying, I got so excited about punk rock, and I remember I brought a cassette that we'd made off of the clock radio of, it was God Save the Queen, and I brought it over to play it for Chris and Tom and Daryl, and I was just like, this is amazing. I think at the time I'd already owned a Ramones record, but it was the Sex Pistols that blew us all away.
Well, how did you get your sound? Because your sound is not punk at all.
No, it's more British Invasion. I mean, we were really into the Beatles. We were into that whole punk rock energy, and actually, Chris and Tom and I were playing together, and then we split up. I went on to have more of a post-punk style band called Anti-Set, and we were really into bands like Wire and Joy Division and that sort of stuff. And Chris and Tom got a lot more into hardcore punk, which is just kind of starting to follow in the wake of the initial punk explosion. So they were into bands like Discharge and Black Flag, and more. They got into the California punk scene,
Right.
and I got a lot more into the British post-punk scene. And then we kind of went along like that for a while in our separate bands. Chris and Tom made a record, which is, I think, one of the most valuable Canadian punk records ever. And I sold my copy of it for $1,700.
What?
They did it as 7-inch, as Gentlemen of Horror, and it's one of the most valuable Canadian punk records of all time.
$1,700?
I got $1,700 for mine. That may still be the record. This was about 8 years ago, and at the time, that was the record for most money paid for a Canadian punk 7-inch.
Holy shit, that's amazing.
Yeah. And they were with me, too. It's funny, we were standing side stage watching Soul Asylum at a festival, and we were just about to go on, and I got a text saying that it had sold for $1,700, and I remember we're all high-fiving and slapping each other on the back and stuff.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
When the band started, how hard was it to get radio play in the U.S. or to get known in the U.S.?
I don't know. We weren't really taking care of the business side of it. Network was, but having said that, Network were founded by the band Mauve and their manager, and Mauve had some U.S. success. They were signed to a San Francisco label, so back then the attitude always seemed to be, well, it's easier to drive down the coast. It's easier to sneak into the U.S. and play a few shows going down the coast than it was to go all the way across Canada. So I know that's what 5440 were doing, for instance. They were going down to California every few months, same as the Odds, Sons of Freedom. There were a number of bands that instead of heading east, they went south. That was what we thought we were going to do too. It was kind of the template. But sort of by accident, Capitol Records of Canada happened to see Grapes playing a show. They were in town. They were in Vancouver to see another band. And in between sets, Tom Harrison, who was the writer for The Province, said, there's a band playing down the street you guys might like. And they came down immediately, wanted to sign us, and that was it. We never really talked about doing a U.S. deal after that at all, largely because it didn't take too long before Capitol Records were interested in signing Grapes, and then Network Records used that as a way to leverage a distribution deal for the whole label in Canada. Okay. So yeah, in terms of breaking in the States, I remember, I don't remember, kind of a political thing possibly, that EMI or Capitol in the States licensed our first album directly from Network. And again, I don't know exactly what the deal with all of that was. And it did get some traction on college radio, and then much to our surprise, it actually got the song Misunderstanding made top 10 in Minneapolis. So that would have been a foothold if we'd done that style of trying to break the band. If we'd just gone back to the towns where we had radio play over and over, that would have been much smarter instead of just trying to tour the States.
Right.
Dallas was another town where, again, much to our surprise, on our first tour, we played a club called Club Clearview, and our show was sold out. We were like, really? We had no idea, because all this is kind of pre-internet, right? So right. You just don't know where things are happening until you get there.
Interesting. Yeah, I've always wondered, because there's so many bands, even The Hip and Kim Mitchell had trouble, making it in the States. And yep. I always wondered what the reason was for that.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of reasons. Sometimes an act just doesn't appeal to the American aesthetic, or it could be just bad timing. Not the wrong region at the wrong time. Like, I know with Grapes, we went down. We did one massive tour of the States, 67 shows. Then we did a much more focused tour the next time we went down. We did 2 weeks, and we only went to the places where we did well. And I think there was one show that was a fill-in that didn't do that well, but all the other shows did great. And we sort of went, oh, so this is the way to do it. And the band broke up before we got a chance to kind of try that philosophy again. In the meantime, Network started working with Bare Naked Ladies, and that's exactly how Bare Naked Ladies broke. Is they kept going back to, we've got some play in Boston, then let's keep going back to Boston. And they concentrated on the areas where they had something going.
Right.
If you look at the Rush documentary, it was the same kind of thing. They kept crisscrossing the same geographic regions, because that's where they were. That's where they're getting their foothold.
Right, Cleveland.
Yeah, exactly. And we did not do it that way. That would have been the time to do that kind of marketing.
Right.
I mean, and it all has to do with label politics as well. We were then our third album came out in England, and it got some great press. And our fourth album came out in Europe, and we were touring there, and it was all good. And we started to chart in France, and then we were like, oh, okay, are we going to go back? And the label was just like, yeah, no, we're not going to send you back. And it's like, but we've entered the album charts. And they're like, yeah, no. I mean, it's pretty weird. It's like years later I found out that all the things I wasn't had been a minor hit in the Netherlands. I had no idea of that. You know, you just don't know these things until it's too late.
Right, and nowadays you would know that right away with the internet.
That's exactly it. But, you know, I remember you do these sub-publishing deals and stuff like that. Nobody communicated with each other.
Really?
Yeah.
Missed opportunity.
That's right. I mean, as much as it's great to go, oh, well, now we can find out anything we want. We can also listen to any song we want, which is why the record industry is, about 95% finished.
Right. Done.
Yeah.
It's sad, though. You know, it's funny. I was watching the video for All the Things I Wasn't yesterday, and there's a scene in the video where you're sitting on the bed listening to a record and looking at the album sleeve. I thought back to when I was younger, and I would buy a record, and it was this massive event. I would sit there for hours just listening to it, reading the liner notes, the thank yous, everything, the words. It's changed so much.
Mm-hmm.
I miss it.
It's just gone. That doesn't exist. And sure, record stores exist, and I don't even bother going in anymore. I used to go in all the time, because I could still kind of get that feeling, but no. My interests have moved on.
So here's a little trivia question for you. What album were you listening to in that video?
Well, we each picked a cover. I wasn't listening to a record. That was Tom. I was listening on the bed playing the guitar.
Right.
But yeah, we each picked an album to be in front. So I picked Led Zeppelin 4, Vince picked Lee Michaels' Fifth, Chris picked The Basement Tapes by the band, and Tom picked Hotel California. Right. Because we thought kind of between those four records, it covered a lot of, at least what we sounded like live. Because live we tended to be a bit heavier and, whatever. So, and also we definitely had a California country rock, harmony rock thing. I remember one of the reviews we got said that in the Grapes of Wrath world, the Beatles and Eagles would be best mates. So that's, I guess, what we were kind of going for.
Right on. That's cool. Well, I'll tell you this. Last week I went to a flea market, and I found your Greatest Hits album, and I did the exact same thing I did when I was a little kid. Opened up the packaging and just read all the words and listened to it straight through, read everything, and it was a great moment to... I just miss it so much, that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, and it also represented, I think, a lot of things that we... that have fallen by the wayside. Like, to me, an album meant you had to take time out for it. It's the same thing as a phone call from a rotary phone, where you'd have to go to the phone, devote that time, be in that place, do the phone call. At most, you would doodle while being on the phone, but you wouldn't be walking around, doing other things. And the same with listening to music. You would go to the altar of music and clean the record carefully and put the needle down carefully and sit in the prime position and look at the album cover as you consider the record. And now music is just so much in the background. It's like, what do you want to hear? Oh, I've got it on my phone that I always have with me. Any song I want to hear, there it is.
Right.
It's not the same thing. We don't put the same energy and care into it. I don't. I can remember reading about a record in an obscure book and then having to spend 2 or 3 years every time I went into a record store. Okay, look for this Mott the Hoople album. Look for this album. Look at and I would have my mental list, and then finally I would start running across these records, and my gosh, when I think back, how much time in the day was taken up.
Absolutely. Hours and hours I would sit on my bed just listening to music.
But this was what I mean about the self-care thing. We really, in the 21st century, have so much time taking time out for ourselves. And, it's like people are going, oh, I baked a loaf of bread, look at me go. But it's like just so many of the things that we did as part of our everyday life, like listening to a record or reading a book. I seldom do either of those things. It just always seems like there's something else that has to get done. And I feel like kids are being robbed of that too. They're all, they're playing video games. They're not developing relations. God, what an old man. They're not reading books and listening to music, but it's the truth.
It is. Yeah. I can't get my daughter to sit down for 5 minutes to listen to a song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's always on in the background.
Yeah. That's it, and that's kind of it for me too. And which is weird because that's not me.
No, and it's the same with me. I don't know what the deal is, but I did it last weekend. I bought a bunch of Canadian CDs, And I sat there for hours just sitting on my couch, just listening to music. And it was a beautiful day.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. Yeah. By the way, I just wanted to thank you for all the things I wasn't, by the way.
Oh.
That is just, in my opinion, and I'm not just ass kissing here, that is one of the best songs, most perfect songs I've ever heard.
Well, thank you very much. I wish I could write a bunch of them.
It just, I mean, I like all your music, but that song is just, I think a lot of it has to do with memory. And
Yeah.
I remember that's probably the first song I ever heard from you guys. And I remember watching it on Much Music and just being blown away by how perfect that song was.
Well, that was kind of it for us. It was sort of a perfect moment for a lot of people, and regardless of whatever age they were at when they heard the song, I guess it was different enough than what was going on. I didn't, when I brought it into the band, it didn't have lyrics, and everybody really liked it, but they were like, yeah, this could be like kind of a cool little instrumental that links a couple of things or whatever, and then I said, it maybe should have lyrics. So the original demo of it, I'm singing the instructions on how to hook up a power amp, but to the melody of all the things I wasn't. And
I'd like to hear that.
I'd like to find it. I bet Chris has it. And then there's one version of it where I literally wrote the lyrics sitting outside the house where we were recording demos, right as I was to go and do it. And I thought they were going to be placeholders. I didn't think that they were going to, I was like, okay, we can't give the label crappy lyrics. And then it just stuck. And then the label said, oh yeah, no, this is going on the record. And then they insisted that it open the album, and we actually argued with them a bit about it. We were like, that doesn't make sense. And they're like, no, this is it. And they were completely right about it.
Yeah.
So we ended up, having like I guess our biggest song was the least conventional, which is also helpful because
Absolutely.
that's what people remember.
Absolutely. And I was trying to learn it on guitar last night. That's a bitch of a song to play.
It's not that bad. There's
it's pretty tough for me.
yeah. Well, there's way harder ones. And I never play it flawlessly. So.
I don't know, man. I don't know. It's quick. It's really tough. Okay, a couple fun little questions. Grapes of Wrath is headlining a Canadian Day at an 80s or 90s music festival.
Yeah.
Who's playing with you?
Oh my God.
All Canadian.
Yeah. Well, obviously the Pikes have to be there.
Of course.
Because I'm in that band too. And this is a tough one because there will be so many bands forgotten.
Let's say 5 bands.
Are we talking about now or back in the day?
Back in the day.
Back in the day. It would have. Well, we played a gig with Mary Margaret O'Hara in New York, and that was really good. I'm trying to think. Change of Heart back then were killer. They were one of my favorites. I loved Asexuals from Montreal were another of my favorite bands. My God, this is a really hard question because obviously we know so many people.
Of course. When you write these questions, you think, oh, that shouldn't be too tough, but then you think about it, and there's just way too many.
Yeah, and you don't want to leave people out. You don't want to. I don't know. It's like, oops, sorry. And that's the biggest thing. I mean, I know so many people. And part of it is I can think of bands I loved seeing back in the day, or should I think about bands that I never saw? A friend of mine is writing a book based on the 500 greatest albums of all time thing from Rolling Stone, and he's doing the 50 greatest Canadian albums, and a whole bunch of people have he's asked a whole bunch of people to give their 50 favorite albums and rank them in order. It's tough. I've got that list somewhere on my computer, which would probably take me way too long to find. But it was an interesting exercise, and it took hours and hours and hours just thinking of all the different bands you saw, all the bands you wanted to see.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just too many.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about the answer to this question as well, and I mean, obviously my musical tastes are a little different than yours, but when you have bands like Rush and Kim Mitchell and Pursuit of Happiness, I mean, it just goes on, and I have no idea who I'd want to see. I mean, I remember seeing a Canada Day festival with Jeez, who was there? Kim Mitchell, Brian Adams, Colin James, Rock and Hyde. They were all there together, and I thought, wow, Canada's good.
Yeah.
But that's only 4.
Well, like when you think about some of the roadside attraction bills that the hippies to put together, Brian Adams did his Waking Up the Neighbors tour, and we did one of the dates on that. And, they were just, there were some really great bills.
Rheostatics.
Yeah, I love the fact that, the hip definitely got more left field. Like having Per Ubu on the bill, they brought Ron Sexsmith out. They really did put on some good bills.
Absolutely, they did.
But it's really, like I said, looking back, it's really tough. There's, there's so many bands that were great, and especially when you think about the periods that bands were great. There was that really great kind of bunch of bands that all popped up after the Replacements played Montreal, and then you had Asexuals and Doughboys and Nils and all those bands.
Doughboys, I forgot about them too.
Oh, come on. They were great.
They are
Actually,
great.
you know what? The first time I saw Doughboys, it was their first tour, and they had a different drummer who used to sing half the song, so him and Kastner would trade off, and I loved it. They were more like Husker Du that tour. They were really great. Oh, and No Means No are another Canadian band who I saw one of their first shows and was just flabbergasted. They got shut down after 4 songs, and I just remember like when the show got shut down, everybody's just like looking at each other in amazement.
That's awesome. Well, it's nice to hear that you're not just the mainstream music. Like, I love the mainstream, the Rush and the Kim and the Bryan Adams. I love all that stuff, but it's nice to hear these different bands that, something to listen to now that I can check out.
Yeah, it was a different experience for me growing up in Kelowna. I didn't, none of us were into mainstream music. So we kind of missed out on a lot of stuff in a way just by being, just by being punk rock kids even before punk rock came along. We just had a shitty attitude, and we weren't about to listen to the music that provided the soundtrack to us being beaten up and chased around by bullies. So yeah, we avoided, I never listened to AC/DC until I was probably in my late 20s or 30s, because it's like, no, this is the soundtrack to being chased. So yeah, we missed out on a lot of that stuff. Yeah, for us it was a lot more of the obscure and underground and the stuff you had to have a bit of a search for.
But now that you're into that, do you appreciate it now?
Oh well, sure. I mean, like when I wished I'd had the chance to see Rush. I've seen the documentaries on them, and I totally get it. I get why they're such a great band and everything. I just wasn't, if you're going to compare 2 bands that are pretty dissimilar, I'd say Wire and Rush are pretty much as dissimilar as you can get. So, yeah, I was certainly into the more clangy, dissonant version of things. There's actually a pretty good Facebook group right now that I see Tom's always posting on, called CanCon Club, and it's just people posting different obscure Canadian bands. It goes so deep, like there's so much Canadian music out there. Painter was another band that I remember liking a lot when I was a kid.
Wow, see, these are all bands I don't know, because I was more into the well, I hate to say this, but I was into the kind of 80s hair metal at the time. Right.
Well, Painter were a 70s band, and they had a song called West Coast Woman, and again, it's one of those songs that's worth looking for. It's like if Grand Funk were trying to be a little more flower power.
Wow.
Yeah. There's so much good stuff.
Yeah, there is. All right, one more question, then I'll let you go because you got to get running. I think I know the answer because we talked about it earlier, but name the one song of yours that made you go, holy shit, we nailed it. The perfect Grapes tune.
I always thought Peace of Mind, Peace of Mind was written earlier than that, but that one really felt like a complete song. Well, same Misunderstanding too. Like when we worked on that, we just knew, there was no more fat to trim, and so it appealed to our punk rock, don't bore us, get to the chorus aesthetic. But it was also doing things that punk rock songs weren't supposed to do. Like we decided right from the get go that we were going to write about girls and stuff like that, because we were already getting tired of the punk rock attitude. So,
Right.
romance sucks. It's like, no, we don't think so. So,
So when you've recorded it, you kind of know right away that was special.
yeah, that it just felt good. I mean, it's like trying on shoes, and when you put on a pair of shoes that just fit, you go, okay, this is it. That was sort of it.
It must be an amazing feeling.
It's good, but I try not to linger in it too long. I mean, I still feel it from songs I've written that nobody's ever even really heard. But I go, ooh, that's a couple of good lines there. Even songs I've written the last few weeks. I guess when you feel like you nailed it, you feel like you nailed it. It's to me, it's got very little to do with the success. And my wife was going through some videos on Instagram the other day, and she saw one of us of Grapes playing Misunderstand. Yeah, no, All the Things I Wasn't. And the whole audience is singing along and drowning us out, and it was just so weird for me because that's not my experience. When I'm up there performing the song, I'm trying to sing it as good as I can. I'm oblivious to the fact that no one can hear me.
Right. My next door neighbor, he wanted to let you know that he thinks that the reason Grapes is so great, and so many of the Canadian bands are so great, is because they really do take time and spend time with their fans. And he said he saw you near Ottawa, and after the show, you guys were out having beers with the crowd. And I think that's something that makes, I don't know if that's a Canadian thing, but I haven't seen that very much with American bands or British bands. They kind of hide. So
Willie's always done it. Willie Nelson was actually where we found out about this from. And I was really encouraging to the other guys when we started playing together. I said, instead of just disappearing to the dressing room, they're not kids. We can actually go out there and talk and answer some questions. But then I started kind of shying away from it because everybody wants to shake my hand. People want hugs and stuff like that. And I started getting hurt. So I actually stopped shaking hands 3 years ago.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, because it's not like you have different things to fear now. I realize you don't worry about 14-year-old girls like jumping on you and stealing something or whatever, but you do worry about some guy who's had too much to drink and he's remembering when he was 18 and he saw you and then he crushes your hand and then you can't play anymore. So,
right.
Right. Because I'm serious. People are stronger than they think they are.
You can damage someone's hand easily.
Yeah.
And then they can't play their guitar or their drums or whatever.
Well, that's it. I've got arthritis now, and I just have to. You just have to care for your body in ways that you never imagined. You're out, when you're 20 and getting epically drunk every single night, and then you bounce right back and do it again the next day. It's like no.
So this is a message to everybody listening: don't shake hands.
That's it. Well, you're not supposed to anymore anyway. But it's the most incredible thing. Like, then it turned into the selfie thing. So after shows, everybody wants to squeeze in with you and get pictures and all of this stuff. It's really hard to avoid the whole, human energy thing. So it'll be interesting to see how concerts. I'm still into chatting with people and meeting them, but I'm sure we'll find a way.
Yeah. Well, if you do make it out to Ottawa, when was that? October?
I think we were supposed to be there October 2nd or something
October
like that.
2nd, yeah. If you do make it up, then me and my neighbor, beers are on us.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
This has been great. Thank you so much. And thank you for introducing me to some of these bands that the mainstream people might not know.
Yeah, well, that was our world. We were really excited by the Canadian, indie punk rock scene. That's what spurned us forward. Like 5440 were... Honestly, they were part of it too. They put out 2 independent records before they ever went to a major. Pikes as well. They started as an indie band as well. I mean, I've talked to Jay about this. He said, they wanted to make it and but they were taking their inspiration from American and British indie bands that were like just putting out records and sending them out in the mail.
Right.
So, whether or not you think of us bands as having anything much to do with the punk rock scene. We were both. I don't think any of the bands would have existed if it wasn't for getting some of that punk attitude.
I got to start listening to more punk.
Well, it's just more the matter of you don't need somebody in a suit with a checkbook to tell you you're allowed to go into the studio. You like in Grape's case, we had yard sales, and we scraped the money together, and we went in the studio for 2 days and made a record.
Wow.
You know, that's the punk rock attitude.
Were you recording live, or were you doing tracks?
Well, we tracked initially live off the floor, then we would go in and replace the bass and guitar tracks, and and everything was done one take. You know, because we'd practiced our songs so much that all we would do is just take turns playing them into the microphone, and it was done.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for this, Kevin. This was fantastic.
Sure. Nice chatting with you.
Yeah, and best of luck. And, geez, I really hope something happens with this music scene so we can get some music going.
Something will, because people need it too much. And I look forward to when we get it all worked out.
Right on. And we'll see you in Ottawa, hopefully on October 2nd.
Yeah, fingers crossed. All right, take care. Thanks
you
for
too.
calling.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.